Welcome to Forum 360. This is Mark Welfley, your host today. Thank you for joining us for our global outlook with a local view. Are you a leader? Can you think of 3 qualities in a leader that you might admire? According to dictionary.com, the definition of lead is to show someone or something the way to a destination by going in front of them or beside them. Leadership has been studied, examined, diagnosed, and written about for decades. It's a popular seminar topic. The internet offers a quote about leadership from just about anyone from any walk of life. According to a recent survey, there are about 15,000 books on leadership in print. So do we need another view on leadership? Well, judge for yourself. My guest today offers a view on leadership that comes not from left field, but from the pasture. Today, we will explore the behaviors of horses and the lessons these behaviors teach us about leadership, even if you're not a horse enthusiast. Before you say, "What?" let my guest explain. She is Leslie Ungar. You may have seen her on this program before, as she is a frequent host of Forum 360. Leslie is an author, executive coach, speaker, speechwriter, and owner of the company Electric Impulse. Leslie's latest book is called HORSETALK Lessons in Leadership for Entrepreneurs, Executives, and everyone in between. HORSETALK is chock full of stories, insights, lessons, and calls to action. So welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be on this side of the Zoom microphone.
It's great to see you on that side. So tell us, what is the connection between horses and leadership?
You know, it's like many other ways that I see horses. To me, the connection is so very, very clear. For one thing, horses have survived for centuries because they could correctly identify the leader of the herd. You know, if they pick the wrong leader to follow, they might, follow him off a cliff. So in the wild, horses have to be astute at being able to identify leadership. So that's one reason. I started using horses when I showed horses for 25 years. And when I started speaking and coaching, I would use examples from the horse show ring with my clients. Like, you only have to be good for 15 feet. And it seemed to resonate. And so I had the idea of creating a day, no riding involved, that mere mortals could use horses to teach them about their own communication and leadership skills. Because what I see so clearly is how a person is in the pasture is how they are in the boardroom or the kitchen or a meeting or wherever else. It's how you are is how you are. And I see it so clearly, I want to share it with other people.
Let's talk about leadership for a second, or a half an hour. Can anyone be a leader? Is it a nature or a nurture or a combination of both? How do you see it?
You know, I would compare that to a question I often get about speakers. You know, is a great speaker born or are they made? And I think it's the same thing. You know, I'll take Martin Luther King. I like to use him as an example because he worked really, really, really hard on his speeches. He would leave his family of 4 small kids and go to a hotel room and write on index cards. He would write out his speeches and cross out and insert, and he worked really hard. And then I'm kind of personally insulted when people say, "Oh, well, he's a natural born speaker." No, he worked really hard at it. Now, are people born with some qualities that will help them? Yes, absolutely. Martin Luther King's voice, his presence. Yes, there are some things that can help and some things we have to overcome. But what I like to say to my clients is that no one came out of the womb being a great speaker. No one came out of the womb being a great leader. They may have qualities, they still have to work on them.
Can a leader be, say, a great orator, but a poor writer, or vice versa? And
Well, let's first look
together.
at the connection between speaking and leading. I was born and raised in Akron, Ohio, home of Purell. We used to be tire capital of the world. And I say that because when I was growing up, we still had the Goodyears and the Goodriches and the Firestones making tires. Well, I don't think back then that a CEO had to be effective at speaking. And when I say speaking, I think of it as a wheel with many spokes, a formal speech, leading a meeting, being a participant in a meeting, doing a radio interview, a podcast, a TV interview, one-on-one. I don't think that then they had to be as effective. They could just kind of, just lead from on high of just kind of giving out commands of what they needed to be done. I think today you have to be an effective speaker, communicator. And that's why some of my clients might be an accomplished CEO. And someone might say, well, why would an accomplished CEO, need you? They're already a CEO. Because there's some spokes on that communication wheel that although they got to be CEO, they know that they can be more effective. And so you continue to want to be effective to either grow your skills or adapt your skills to a changing workplace, where even Bobby Kennedy's speaking style changed greatly and evolved to a different time. So it's continuing to improve. You have to be an effective leader. Do you have to be able to write it? I would say that the best speakers collaborate in some way with their speechwriter, but if they can own it, if they can give it in a way that sounds like it's theirs, then that's the most important thing.
Let's turn to your book on Horse Talk. I love stories. I learn a lot from stories. So tell me a story where you might have taken a lesson from Horse Talk and applied it to a client or a leader or a situation, and where you started and how it ended.
And that's one of the things about Horse Talk that is apparent to some of the participants more than others. It's a small group of people, usually 6, 8, 10 max. They either don't know each other at all, or they might all know each other. They might be, say, from the same company. Usually they don't know each other at all. And whether they can see the lessons or not, my job is to point them out and try to connect those dots for them so that they can see how it applies to them. So in the afternoon of Horse Talk, we do what's called obstacle course. And there's maybe 50 different pieces of things in the pasture. And the team gets instructions. They have to build an obstacle course of 3 to 5 obstacles and get a horse to go through it without touching the horse in any way. So I'm watching this, and some of the people that come to Horse Talk, I've never met before. They come that morning. It's the first time I've ever seen them. Others are coaching clients that I have seen and will continue to work with. So one of the women, we'll name her Karen. In the afternoon of the obstacle course, I noticed that she mentally disengaged. She stayed in the pasture, but you could tell that she was not engaged with the team in any way on building the obstacle course, strategizing the obstacle course, or getting the horse through the obstacle course. She was just standing off to the side. So she was a current client. I went up to her and I said, you need to stay engaged. And she said, well, I just don't know anything about this. I can't help in any way. Well, none of the participants know anything about it, but she had just chosen to withdraw and not participate. I let it go because she was a coaching client. I was going to see her and we could work on it at a later time. She calls me a couple of weeks later. She works with several CEOs that she represents. She's in New York City at a round table with 3 CEOs. They take a break. One of them leans over and says to her, Karen, you need to stay engaged. Now, Are you really going to tell me that what happens in the pasture doesn't apply to outside of the pasture? Sometimes I have to work a little harder to see that connection, but staying engaged is one of the lessons from Horse Talk. And it's something that any leader of a family, a Boy Scout troop, or a company needs to do at all times.
So share with me a couple of your lessons throughout your book, 100 of them. Your book, the ones that you seem to bubble up or come up the most when working with leaders and clients. Which ones are really popular, and maybe why are they so popular?
Well, one of the most popular ones is your hip bones need to be facing the horse. Okay, that's a popular one. I once had a participant that said to me, Leslie, it's been so long since I've seen my hip bones. I don't know where they're facing. But this one is so valid in and outside of Horse Talk. There's a part of the day that we're in something called the round pen, and it's a round enclosure. It's a horse, the participant and me. The horse is loose. It can go anywhere in the round pen. It can do anything. Each participant is going to learn that they can get that horse to walk, trot, and canter both ways without being attached to it in any way. But one of the secrets is you have to keep your hip bones between the middle of the horse and the back of the horse. If you take your hip bones off the horse is going to disengage. And so if you get your hip bones too far in front of the horse is going to stop. If you get your hip bones too far behind the horse, they're going to speed up too much. Well, if you think about it, someone might say, well, what does that have to do with my life as a professional or my life period? Well, think about it. How many times does someone come and ask you pre-COVID, okay? How many times does someone come and ask you a question? You're at your desk, at home or at work, a laptop, a desktop. They ask you a question and you keep your hip bones and your eye gaze on your computer while you're answering them. Your hip bones are not facing them. And you want your message to be heard and implemented. A restaurant, let's say pre-COVID, you're at a restaurant, or maybe during COVID, you're at a restaurant. You're sitting in a booth and a waiter or waitress comes over and takes an order. You stay on your phone or you stay engaged with your dining partner, and you don't even turn and look at the waiter or waitress who's going to be serving your food. You know what I remind myself, if I do that just as bad as anyone else, my hip bones aren't on the waiter or waitress, I say to myself, you know what, Leslie, they spit in your food, you deserve it, because you couldn't give them your attention. So when you think about it, a child comes and asks you a question, a coworker comes and asks you a question, are your hip bones facing them?
It's a good image in my head. Pick another. And before we do, I want to let everybody know who's watching here that we are talking to Leslie Ungar. Leslie Ungar is the author of her latest book called Horse Talk, Lessons in Leadership for Entrepreneurs, Executives, and everyone in between. And we were talking about some of the lessons. Pointing your hip bones in the right direction was a lesson she just shared with us. I've been dying to ask you this question about President Biden.
Okay.
He's been in office now for a short period of time. I'm sure you've had a chance to observe him both physically and kind of through the media. So can you characterize his leadership style and maybe apply a few of your Horse Talk lessons to his style?
Okay, first, let me apply something in his speaking style, okay? When I work with people on speaking, especially formal speeches, there are what we call rhetorical devices that a speaker uses to connect more quickly to the audience, to make a point more quickly. One of them is using the term, the simple truth is. Biden does this, President Biden, almost every time you hear him, he will say, the simple truth is. And every time he does, I kind of laugh at it. It's a very effective rhetorical device, and that is something that he does in the speaking side. On the leadership side and the lessons, you know, a couple that come to mind is, one of them is to be very careful of your frustration level. And you rarely see
Mm.
him frustrated through all of the primaries, even the debates, a little bit, but really not much considering all of the frustrating circumstances there are. Very, very even keeled. And there's a saying with horses that if you need to get something done with a horse, if you go about it like you have 15 minutes, it's going to take all day. If you go about it like you have all day, it's going to take 15 minutes. And so I think of him keeping a very even keel, which is very, very important. You cannot be an inconsistent person and be an effective leader. So, being consistent and not showing frustration is a huge way to what I call protect your value.
Mhm. Thank you. Um, Common mistakes that leaders make. What are they, and kind of refract them against the lessons in your book?
One of the things I think is one of the biggest challenges of any leader today is what I call when do you come down from your literal or figurative strategic perch? And how long do you stay down once you come down?
Mhm.
Disney calls it walking the park. They charge their executives with getting out of their offices and walking the park. In manufacturing, they call it walking the floor. Well, it's a challenge on a daily basis for a leader of when do you come out and be in person, and then when you do, how long do you stay? So if you picture this round pen with a horse, and let's say the horse comes in and you don't want him to come into the center, you need to get him out, but you can't stay out there with him. The job isn't to walk around the circle with the horse. The goal is to get the horse to walk around with you in the center. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like you in your office. You can't go do everyone's job for them. So micromanaging is one of the challenges that we see that will show up in the round pen. If someone's a micromanager, I'll see it in the round pen. On the other extreme of that is if they don't realize that they need to come out sometimes and be more present in some way, whether it's physically or it's through the phone or email or whatever it is, their team is going to disengage. So micromanaging and not coming out and realizing the value of your presence, both of those we're going to see at Horse Talk.
How do you strike the perfect balance? How does a leader know when to come down from their perch versus go back up to their perch?
Your audience drives everything. I have what I call my 50 rules of communication. And rule number 4 is your audience drives everything. And that's true whether you're a CEO or a managing partner or chairman of the board, whatever it is you think you are, whatever education you have, the horse doesn't care. The horse doesn't care. That's one of the great reasons to use a horse is that you can't impress them with where you went to school or if you have a corner office or if you have an expense account. That's not why the horse is going to follow you. They don't care. They're going to follow you if they decide you're a leader. So how do you know? You have to get out of your own head and keep looking for what I call observable, measurable evidence. If you take 3 steps and the horse doesn't follow you, you've got to go back and get buy-in from that horse. You can say, well, I'm leading him. Well, you might be leading him, but he's not following. And the horse decides, not you. I had a guy that I like to tell people that if you are wondering if someone is a leader or has leadership potential, send them to Horse Talk and I will tell you. Not because I'm that smart, the horses will tell me if that person is a leader. And what people don't realize is oftentimes they tell me someone's a leader who doesn't identify themselves as a leader. It's not just about the horse saying, no, you're not a leader. Sometimes the horse says you're a leader. Well, this one man was a senior vice president, and he was picked as the successor to the CEO. He was Harvard MBA. He was a West Point graduate, nicest guy you could ever meet. He could not get a horse to follow him in a circle. He couldn't get a horse to follow him for 3 feet. He was not a leader, not because I say that, but because the horse said
Yes.
that. You can have the degrees, but horses follow leaders. They're genetically wired to follow the leader of the herd. So you have to look for observable, measurable evidence. Is the horse following you? You know, when you gave your definition, I chuckled because maybe 10 years ago at a horse talk, there was a young man that was a participant. At the time, he had not gotten his MBA yet. And he was between college, maybe worked 3-4 years, and he would eventually get his MBA. Well, he came to horse talk, and I still remember that the horse was 10 feet in front of him, and he was hanging on to the rope 10 feet behind. And the reason that's burned into my memory is because that's not leadership. You can't lead from the back. You've got to get to the front or the side. And we have a part of the day called the leadership walk, where you lead a horse. And this time you get to actually be attached to the horse. And you have to learn, you have to stay about at their nose to get them to follow. You cannot be too far ahead or they'll just stop and eat grass. You cannot be too far behind or they're going to keep turning around to come back to you. It's your position. Well, when you're positioning yourself as leader of a team or a company, you've got to figuratively be at the nose.
Neat. Take about 30 seconds to a minute, if you will, and just tell me, because we could talk forever about leaders in this era of social media, where there's waning patience and everything at your fingertips. And how does a leader lead with so many other stimuluses out there and so many other matters and factors that will distract from conversation and from listening?
You know, when at a horse show, and the bigger the horse show, the more important the horse show, the more judges you have in the ring. So when you get to nationals, you have 3 to 5 judges. And the reason that's important is one of them is going to see just about everything. So, you know, if you've got one judge in the ring and you make a mistake, maybe it won't be seen. But with 3 or 5 judges in the ring, you pretty much are going to be seen all the way around. And that's kind of like leadership. You have to understand and embrace and accept that leadership is 24/7. While you are a leader, someone is watching at all times. They're either watching on Facebook or Instagram, or they're watching you walk down the hall, or they're watching something. And you have to be aware of that. If you don't want to be watched all the time and you don't want someone to be looking all the time, then don't be a leader. You know, I have seen people go from leadership positions to positions that are not leadership. They got tired of it. And that's their choice. Everyone doesn't have to be a leader. We need followers as much as we need leaders. But you've got to be aware that it is 24/7 and everything is being watched. And it may be fair, it may not be fair, but how you walk down the hallway, how you greet someone, it's going to be remembered. And here's the thing. We're lucky if people remember one thing about us, one, and we don't get to pick what that one thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So if they remember that you were, snapped at them one day, that may be what they remember about you. If they remember, there was a CO in Akron, he didn't last long after this, but on Facebook, his photo was smoking a cigar and he was in healthcare. And that's what gets remembered. So, if you want to step up to leadership, you need to know it's 24/7 and you don't get to decide to take a time out.
Pick somebody, anyone, a leader, and tell me why he or she is a good leader.
Tell you why he or she is a good leader. All right, let me take Churchill. Okay, I'm going to take Churchill for a couple different reasons. During World War II, and he came to his office during World War II, he was exceptional. And he was exceptional because he told the truth over and over again about the bombings that London was going to be getting every single night. And he went out and he walked the park. He went out the day after every bombing, and he was out there at different houses or different hospitals, and he was visible, and he kept talking people and telling them the truth, but giving them hope. Interestingly enough, World War II is over. England at least is still standing. and he gets voted out of office. So he becomes important because leadership is so much about the fit. And again, that's another commonality with horses. If a horse is they call it high strung, that's not a bad horse. It means it needs an experienced rider to be a good fit. It's a bad fit if your daughter, who is just learning horses, gets a horse that's, quote, high strung. That may not be a good fit. And it's the same thing with leaders. The UK said Churchill was a good fit for wartime and not for peacetime. And we see that in leaders. It's not just someone's resume. It's about, are they a good fit for this company at this time?
Thank you, Leslie. Good segue into Winston Churchill, because he once also said, there's something about the outside of a horse that is good for the inside of a man. And although I'm not a horse enthusiast, I found this to be true when reading your book. In your book, I find that there's something for everyone. It was a real page turner for me, a good chance to self-examine myself. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today. And with that, we will put this show and direct our hips out to the pasture. So thank you for joining us on Forum 360.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.